Welcome back to another episode of The Scorekeepers. I'm your host, Daniel Farrell, and on this episode, I'll be speaking with conductor Micah Gleason. Micah is a conducting fellow at the Curtis Institute of Music and has been recognized for her diverse performance abilities as a conductor, vocal soloist, and chamber musician. Micah has conducted notable ensembles, including the Orchestra Now, the Curtis Symphony Orchestra, and the Eastern Festival Orchestra. She's also served as the assistant conductor of opera productions for Opera Philadelphia, the Bard Graduate Vocal Arts Program, Curtis Opera Theater, and the Glimmerglass Festival. I'm excited to dive into her work and learn about her musical story. Welcome to The Scorekeepers. Welcome to the show, Micah. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
So the Opera Philadelphia will be putting on its O22 festival, and you're their assistant conductor. For our audience to have some context, what is the role of an assistant conductor in an orchestra?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it varies in my experience in a way depending on the conductor that you're assisting. So typically the duties can include anything from running rehearsals, so conducting during staging rehearsals, even sometimes music rehearsals, tech rehearsals, things like that. You're there pretty much all the time, taking notes, listening. I always sort of feel like the assistant conductor and the assistant director, it usually looks, sometimes like you're sitting writing on paper the whole time, and that's pretty much it. You're there taking
You're an
notes.
extra set of ears, I guess.
No, exactly. That's actually a very big part of the job, especially as you get into later in the process when you're putting the pieces together. So when you've got the orchestra and the singers during the Sitz probe, and then especially once you start to do the dress rehearsals and you have the orchestra and the singers and the costumes and the staging, there can be unforeseen problems that come up. So usually when I get into that part of the process, when we're out of the rehearsal room and in the hall, you'll see me running from my little perch right behind the conductor where I have my score and like a huge stack of Post-it notes to different places around the house, listening and trying to get a sense of sight lines and all sorts of things like that. So conduct rehearsals sometimes, take a lot of notes. Sometimes you'll be tasked with distributing notes, so giving notes to singers or orchestral players, explaining things to them that may need to be explained. Depending on who I'm working with, sometimes I find that I end up taking a ton of notes that may never see the light of day, but it's your job just to sort of write down everything that you hear. And then some conductors that I've worked with want to hear every single thing that I've written down and want to know everything I hear. So it sort of depends, but it's a really fun process for me. I love doing opera, I love theater and music and the intersections. So yeah, I love to do it.
You'll be working with Opera Philadelphia with the Verdi's Simon Boccanegra.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about that opera?
It's a really good one. It's one of the lesser done Verdi operas. I don't know exactly why. It hasn't been done at Opera Philadelphia for almost 40 years, which is definitely not something you would say about some of the big Verdi warhorses like La Traviata or Rigoletto. It was written around what scholars call Verdi's middle period, but then it was revised almost 30 years after the original. And it is similar to Verdi also wrote an opera based on Otello, and it's similar in a lot of ways. I actually think it's a story about political intrigue and unrest. I wonder a little bit if one of the reasons it's done not as much is because there's a lot of men in the cast. It's one soprano and then one tenor, or two tenors, I guess there's a small tenor role as well, and then a bunch of baritones. So it's a lot of political turmoil. There's a lot of people who take on disguises or different names. There's a long lost daughter. There's all sorts of secrets, but it is excellent music. There's some really good chorus parts that are quite reminiscent to me of parts of the Verdi Requiem, which is one of my favorite pieces of music, and some would say his best opera. It's really, I mean, it's wonderful music. It's super exciting. It's the plot moves along pretty fast. It's a short and sweet opera. It's only about 2 hours
Oh,
short
wow, that is
for an
very
opera.
short.
Yeah,
For an opera.
exactly. For an opera, yeah, exactly. But it's really good. I mean, it has all the beautiful stuff you want from Verdi. It has a couple parts that are very reminiscent of Donizetti and the bel canto era. It's really great, great music. So I kind of hope it gets done more often after this because it is a very exciting, confusing but exciting story.
As we've already said so much, operas are just humongous and massive productions. What is the preparation work like for a conductor, specifically for opera? It's a huge thing to manage. Like, what are you doing preparation wise for that?
Yeah, it is huge. It is a massive undertaking, and I think for opera, I think it's hard because it has all the components of preparing an orchestral score that's very long, a long piece, and it also has all of the singing stuff, which means obviously, of course, knowing it, being able to sing it, but also being super familiar with the language. So the meaning of the words, the pronunciation of the words, the idiosyncrasies of the language, and how the language and the music are related. Because so often, musically, there are things that come up in Italian opera or in French music or in German music that are very, very linguistically minded, I think. The sounds, Italian is a very strongly accented language. So you feel that a lot in the music, and then French is an unaccented language, and so in French music a lot of times you feel this sort of endless
Mm.
line. So yeah, there's a whole other component of language study, and also, how are you using the meaning of the words? How is that informing the musical choices that you're making? It's not just what's written on the page musically, but it's also the words. So how the composer is interpreting the words. So I love it because I love that sort of extra layer, and I love this sort of hyper specific, storytelling. You're always telling a story, I think, when you're conducting any music, word texted music or not, but it's very specific in opera, so that's fun. That's a fun part about it, I think.
I was wondering if you could sort of pull back the veil, I guess, on what is the preparation work just for everything that goes into an opera, and where do you start in the process, all the way up until the performance? I mean, how do you manage like the rehearsals, and where's your brain at during that whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, putting on an opera is a gigantic process, and I'm sure what I say now will be missing some steps because there's so many behind the scenes people that I may not even know about, which is amazing. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a clear, first this, then this every single time. But I guess in some order, you choose the opera you're gonna do. You choose the story and the music, and then the production team decides what production they're going to do. What are they going to design? A new one? Is that a collaboration between the director, the set designer, the costume designer, the wig and makeup people, the lighting designer, all of these people on a new production of the opera? And I'm thinking about this actually because Simon Boccanegra is a production that's been done before, as many are, but this summer I was working at the Glimmerglass Festival, and one of the operas I was on was a remount, and one was a brand new production. So I kind of got to watch this happen, which was really fun. It was a super, super, close knit team of the director and the set designer and everyone working together to create this world. And so for us on the musical side of things, conductor, the pianist who's playing everything, the singers even, we may not know exactly the details of the production super far in advance. And that may not matter that much. It might be clear the story you're telling no matter what, but it also might matter a lot. For example, this one that I just did, this brand new production, was of a Handel opera, Ronaldo, which the production that we did, which was conceptualized by the director, Louisa Prosky, who's totally brilliant, and I absolutely love her, and I think she had an amazing idea with this production, but the concept really departs from the original story. So I actually didn't know about the concept until a few weeks before we started rehearsals, and I was like, oh my God, my brain was blown open. And of course, the music doesn't necessarily change, but the context changed so much, and that can potentially affect the choices you make as a musician. But so the concept behind the piece, the production, all of those things try to coalesce. Of course, ideally you want a costume designer who's super, on board with the same ideas as the set designer and the choreographer, and everyone is sort of working together. And then you get the music side of things, and the conductor and the singers prepare the score. Oftentimes, singers especially, I think, will prepare really far in advance if they can, just because not only does it take ages to learn all that music and memorize it, it also sort of takes a long time to get it in your body and in your voice sometimes. And when you are thrown into a staging room and you're asked, okay, sing this while you're running in a circle or laying down or upside down, you want to be super, super comfortable with the music. So that process can start quite far in advance for a lot of people, ideally, if they, know about it with enough time, which doesn't always happen in this world, as I'm sure you know. But yeah, and so then, the conductor, assistant conductor, study the score, make decisions about changes they want to make, not huge changes to the score, but interpretive ideas for the orchestra. They may mark the parts. I know for this production of Simon Boccanegra, the conductor Corrado Ravares has marked all his own parts, so the orchestra has information that comes from him, not just from Verdi, before the process starts. So that happens a lot, but not all the time. Conductor will mark up the parts with information for the orchestra, and then you finally get together the whole team in one place. You get in the room. Ideally, if I ever am conducting an opera, I would love to meet with the director ahead of time, for sure, and as many of the singers ahead of time as possible as well. You can't always. So, some days you all get in the room and you're there for the first time, and then you probably, hopefully, will have a couple music rehearsals before you start staging with the pianist and the singers and the conductor, the assistant conductor, everyone's there. And then you get into staging, and then the director kind of takes over, and the rehearsals are more focused on the dramatic side of things and that part of the vision with, occasional music notes as well sprinkled in.
I'm sure some music notes.
Yeah, they're kind of ever present, Yeah, and then closer to the end of the kind of rehearsal process, the conductor will meet with the orchestra to rehearse them without the singers first, and then add the singers in, usually for a Sitzprobe, so the orchestra and the singers do it together, but the singers are standing still and maybe they have their scores or whatever, and then you maybe will do a Wandelprobe where you don't have costumes necessarily, but you're doing the staging on the stage in the pit. Everyone's there. And then you get into your dress rehearsals and you add in all the crazy things. And, you never think, oh, a wig is going to really affect this musically, but sometimes wigs really will throw a wrench at things. Or like a heavy coat or a long cape or something, So yeah, it's really, you're adding more layers, and until literally the dress rehearsal. That's when everything's finally together. So it's a really big, long process for sure.
Insane.
It's wild. I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons I love opera is like the massive creative collaboration of it all, but it also is so much. It's so big, and
Right.
it's grandiose. It's very fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have zero experience, performing or doing in anything involving opera, So I just,
Yeah.
you go and it's a spectacle, and you don't really think like, oh wow, like this must have been crazy to put together this.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it's so fun, and I think opera is one of those things that hopefully reminds you not to take yourself too seriously,
Mm.
because you might get a note and have to deal with something that is like the most ridiculous, silly thing in the world, because you're like, oh my god, like this person's helmet keeps falling off, or the gloves don't fit. It's so silly.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's theater.
So you're also going to be conducting the Dallas Opera as part of the Hart Institute for Women Conductors. Could you tell us a little about that ensemble and that institute?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm very excited about that, and I just found out that I like won a spot in this cohort. The Dallas Opera some years ago started this institute that I think is amazing, sort of address the gender imbalance in the conducting world. So each year they pick a couple of conductors to be a part of this cohort, and so we'll have a week in November where we meet kind of a lot, like all day, every day, virtually, and do a lot of coaching. They provide a lot of sort of mentorship for us in terms of all of the other parts of being a musician, also that are not music, like um, do you need a manager? How do you
Mm,
your website? You're all these,
that's
all
stuff
these.
they never teach you in
Yes.
school, man.
No, exactly, exactly. And it's such a mysterious world. So I'm very grateful for that. And then in January, we'll all go down to Dallas for 2 weeks and do a lot of working and workshops and rehearsing. And then at the end, we'll do a showcase concert that is a bunch of opera scenes conducted by us with the Dallas Opera Orchestra, and a really, really unbelievably good list of singers. So I'm really, really excited. I don't know yet exactly what I'll be conducting on that concert, but it's gonna be awesome. I
It's
really
cool
can't
that
wait.
it's kind of a medley of, well, I don't know
Yeah,
if medley is the correct term, but just kind of, opera
yeah.
greatest hits or something like that.
No,
Just,
it really is a tasting platter. Yeah, I think
yeah,
they're gonna do a handful of excerpts from 4 different operas. So
wow.
it'll be fun for sure. Yeah.
You touched on it, very briefly, but I mean, much like composition, right? Conducting has unfortunately been just male dominated for basically since it started. What are some of the challenges, you face being a woman in the field of conducting it? And what are some of the things that we can all do to try to elevate more women in this field?
Thanks for asking. I feel that in many ways, I feel very lucky. I feel like I was born at exactly the right moment to be a conductor who's a woman. Because I do think, even when I was starting out, and I didn't sort of start, I started sort of, conducting kind of piqued my interest when I was in undergrad, and I did my first ever conducting like workshop in
Mm,
2018. But even when I was starting out, I experienced pushback in a couple places that I didn't expect to. And I was sort of shocked and disappointed by some people around me, and people I consider to be mentors. But also, I experienced quite a lot of not that, a lot of support
right.
and a lot of encouragement. And I'm very grateful to those people. I'm a singer actually by trade, which is one of the
Hmm.
reasons I love opera. And so I started out mostly in choral conducting, which, because that was my world, I definitely think there are more people who are choral conductors who aren't men. And that's kind of a little bit more the norm, but still, actually, really, even in that world, it's quite imbalanced. I think sort of the main thing is that for anybody who's in a field, you know, of an identity that isn't the norm, The
My cat just hopped up.
I love that. Hello, what a beautiful cat. Sorry, I got so distracted. What a lovely cat. Um, oh yeah, but I think for anyone sort of working in any field like this, you can kind of tell sometimes when people aren't used to that. Like, I
Mhm.
can sort of when I am in a new space with new people, there's certain people that I'm like, oh, you've never had a conductor who's a woman before. And I can tell because even if you're not like doing anything like heinous or disrespectful, there's this like adjustment that you can sort of
Right.
feel, and you're like, okay,
Like
I'm the
tiny little
first.
microaggressions, things like that.
Yeah, or just like they're just kind of shocked, or they're just sort of, they like say something a little weird or do something a little weird, and you're like,
Right.
it's okay, we can just be normal. Um, so I mean, for me personally, I just like I am grateful that it is becoming more and more of the norm. Although it's still a big issue, and which is why I'm really grateful that institutes like this exist. And honestly, for me personally, all my even though there are more and more female conductors coming up, there aren't that many kind of seasoned ones. So like all of
Mm.
my conducting teachers have been men, and I think that's true for most young conductors. And I've been very blessed to have extremely kind and wonderful men who have been my teachers. But, I look forward to a landscape in which there are more teachers who are women and more,
Yeah, like the next
yeah.
gen, that will have
Yeah.
people like you, teaching them.
Yeah. No, exactly, exactly. Because I do think that's very special. And when I was in grad school, I did a master's in conducting, but also a master's in voice. And I was so felt really comfortable and seen in the voice program in a way that I had never felt before. And I think that's for a lot of reasons, but I felt like I was able to develop artistically in a really unique, special way. And I remember at one point, like halfway through my first year, I realized every single teacher in this program is a woman. And I
Right.
hadn't actually realized that. And, that it doesn't necessarily have to be that case for me to be able to grow. But it was an interesting thing for me to know. I was like, oh, I feel like people get me, and
Right.
therefore are kind of helping me grow in my unique path as opposed to trying to fit me into some other mold. And I don't think it's necessarily unimportant that all of those teachers of mine were women. And I think also I had mentioned this to him before, and he was very kind. But one of the things I love about my teacher now, who is Yannick Nezetsegan, who's perhaps the most wonderful guy in the world. Something I admire about him a lot is that the way that he teaches and the way that he leads and the way that he conducts is very not male to me, the way
Mm.
that he acts. And so I think that for me, I've noticed that while it is less and less common for people to expect us to be male when we show up as a conductor, it is still quite common for people to expect us to act male.
Right.
And I've seen this happen a lot. Like, I know a lot of conductors, many, conductors that I know that are women that are older than me, who are in middle age, really had to sort of adopt this dogged intensity
Mm.
in order to get any respect. And I don't blame them at all. And I don't necessarily want to be that way
Right.
myself. And I think I'm very lucky to be, like I said, born now and doing this now. And the way that Yannick leads is so joyful, and it is so positive reinforcement based, and it's very kind, and it's not like a lot of famous conductors have been historically. So, I feel unbelievably blessed to work with him, because not only is he really, truly the best of the best as a conductor, he is kind, and he is himself, and he's really, really, really committed to being this way and not a different way. And so I think it's amazing. I actually remember, I've received a lot of feedback in my life, you need to be less friendly, you need
Mm.
to be more direct, you know, you can't be, all this like smiley person on the podium. And I think, there's a kernel of truth in that, which is that I'm just very verbose and I need to use fewer words. But I sort of got in the habit of sort of trying to cut out as many filler words as I could when I was on the podium. And so the first time I worked with Yannick, I was rehearsing the orchestra and I said, let's go, directly at letter K or whatever. And Yannick said, please, say please. Don't forget to say please and thank you. And I used to, but I kind of had like stopped in a way because I
Right.
had so many men who meant really well, definitely, telling me not to.
Right.
So that was an interesting experience. And I was like, you're right. I must say please. And also I want to say please. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think that what I really would hope is that more and more orchestral players and singers and people who work with conductors will not expect a conductor to be, intense and mean in order to
Right.
respect them. I just don't think that makes sense. I don't think it's necessary. But I do think that a lot of people, especially seasoned players, have been conditioned
Mm.
to associate that kind of behavior with a good conductor, quote unquote, whatever that means.
Right.
So I think sometimes when you show up and you act not that way, people don't take you seriously. But there's no reason for them not to take you seriously as long as you have a good vision and you're prepared and you're good at what you do.
I think that across a ton of different industries, you're seeing the breakdown
Hmm.
of some of these more toxic behaviors from
Totally.
people where it's like this was just how it's done, for such a long time, and finally people are being like, you know what, that's not cool, or let's
Yeah.
just change that slightly. But wow,
Yeah.
that's remarkable to hear.
Yeah. I'm glad. I think leadership in general, the concept of it is changing. And I think that's a really good thing. And I'm happy to be a part of it.
I also wanted to touch on. I mean, we're already talking so much about the whole woman thing, which is great. But you have your Loam, your creative duo that you co-founded with Joanne Evans, and you're working to develop this brand new one-woman opera, exploring the ideas of self and learn slash top morality and artificial intelligence. These grand concepts, I love it. But can you tell
Yeah.
us a little about this ensemble that you co-founded and this new initiative that you have?
Totally. So Loam is a duo that I started in grad school with my dear friend Joanne Evans, who is a phenomenal mezzo soprano, big brain, super creative person. She and I were in grad school together and we partnered for what was sort of like a capstone thesis
Mhm.
project. And we had so much fun with it. We worked so well together that we decided we wanted to work together again and again and again. So we decided to become a duo. And the name loam came because loam is a type of soil that is especially
Mm.
fertile and allows a lot of different plants to grow. It's like a topsoil. So basically, we wanted to be a team that works together with collaborators across a lot of different disciplines to create works. We love dramatic theatrical works. We both love opera, but we also really love chamber music and we love sort of art song and more intimate settings. So we, basically want to create intimate, immersive, dramatic musical works, however that takes form.
Mm.
So the first project that we did together was called The Fragile Femme, and we worked together. It was a project that sort of wove art song and chamber music and spoken poetry together with dance to sort of create a narrative and a meditation on experiences of rage and also femphobia across time and across gender presentations. And that was a really meaningful project for us. And we have a few things cooking, but the next sort of big thing we have in the works is getting the band back together in some senses. So for Fragile Femme, we collaborated with two people that we plan to work with again, because we adore them. George Miller, who's a director who directed Fragile Femme and who will direct our next project. And then Chris Bell, who is a wonderful composer. He and I have been friends since we were 16, I think. And I saw a piece that he wrote when we were teenagers that was for cello, piano, and a dancer. And that was sort of the very first kind of, oh, music is so beautiful when you intentionally incorporate other art forms also. Kind of moment for me. And I thought that was so brilliant that he was, thinking that way as a teenager, and thinking in this very collaborative way. So George and Chris and Joanne and I, along with the librettist Susan Bywathers, want to develop a new work. And the idea for it came mostly from Chris and Susan. We had been throwing around a couple ideas of sort of thematic things we wanted to take on, short stories, long form prose poems, things like that we had gained inspiration from. And Chris was saying that he really wanted to write an opera about AI. And at first, I was actually quite resistant to this idea because I do not like AI very much. It kind of scares me. I get uneasy when I think about it. I get uneasy when I think about the implications of it. I love creative arts and I hate the idea of AI taking over them. Yeah, I think it's kind of scary. But I do think it is something that we should grapple with because it is coming down the pike at us pretty fast. And so, Chris sent me some really interesting things to read and podcasts and, resources to sort of suggest different ideas. And so we knew that we wanted it to be a one-woman opera, sung by Joanne and conducted by me, in which there's a character that creates an AI based on herself and is played by the same person. And then I don't want to give too much away because it's in develop. Yeah, spoilers, exactly. Because Susan, when we got Susan on board with this project, she came in with a really amazing idea for a twist. So I don't want to give it away because spoilers, but basically we are in the process of trying to sort of secure funding for the creation of this project and then, find a residency or somewhere to workshop it, an ensemble, all that stuff. So
it sounds cool. Kind of sounds like a Black Mirror turned into like an opera. I kind of love it.
That's kind of exactly, that's exactly our plan. So we sort of wanted to play around with, because of course, like for someone like me who's kind of afraid of AI, I'm always thinking humans are good, AI are the enemy. But I'm also thinking, the reason that I think AI are the enemy is because humans program AI. And so I sort of feel like it's probably impossible to create something that exists without biases. So what we wanted to sort of play around with was sort of subverting expectations around, good and evil being defined as human and robot, and how do you teach something to be like you, and when you do, what does it reveal about you, and things like that. So that's sort of our goal with this story. But yeah, Susan had some really amazing ideas, and I'm excited. We're hoping to have something sort of like at least a workshop version in the next year. These projects take a really long time, especially when you're DIYing it, but we all are quite determined to make it happen, and we have experience with doing it in the past, so we are not afraid of a little grant writing, and we love to work together. So yeah, that's the next loan project in the works.
Sounds amazing.
Thank you. I'm excited.
I feel like on this episode, we've said the word opera more than any other episode of the show, but and reading your background, it's opera this, opera that, opera this. And, what sparked that love for opera specifically and pursuing conducting in the opera sphere?
Well, I think I mentioned I was a singer first. I'm still a singer. I fell in love with classical singing when I was around 15, and I don't know, something about it felt so good to me, and I, remember sort of the initial recordings that made me just feel ways that I had never felt before. There's this great recording on YouTube. It's actually a bad recording, like the quality is not good, but the performance is unbelievable of Jesse Norman singing Mon cœur sur ta voix from Samson and Delilah, and I just remember listening to that and just being like, I have never felt such raw emotions in my life. I loved singing in choir, and I loved words. I always loved poetry. When I was 16, this was sort of my like come to Jesus, I think I need to be a musician moment, was I was singing in the choir for Vaughan Williams' just phenomenal piece, Dona Nobis Pacem, which is set to the poetry of Walt Whitman, a lot of his war poetry, and I remember we had this amazing conductor, David Freiling, who really is someone that I credit as, one of the people who is the reason I'm doing this, because he sort of illuminated to us how the words set to music in this way and us giving a really, really intentional performance of it could be so very impactful. And I really felt that way, and that poetry is just stunning. And so, Walt Whitman was a very huge anti-war advocate, and this musical setting of it is just so powerful. That was the first time I ever sang with an orchestra, and it was awesome. I couldn't imagine not doing that. So I always loved singing. It was my first love, really, musically. And then I went to college for voice, and I started singing more and more opera. And as I did, I sort of felt two ways. First of all, as a singer, I felt very much drawn to chamber music and art song for a number of reasons, including, once again, I love poetry. And I find, not always, but a lot of the times, art song has kind of more nuanced words and poetry than operas, which are sometimes beautiful text and sometimes, honestly, not the most beautiful text.
Right.
Some librettos are not that great, but the music is good, so there you have it. But also, I kind of enjoyed the agency that I had in chamber music settings that I didn't always feel like I had in the opera setting, depending on the conductor. And this was sort of one of those things that had me start to think like, oh, but what if I was the conductor? And what if I could have agency myself, but also, create spaces for other singers to have that feeling? And it was around the same time I took a conducting class in undergrad that, everyone took, but I had always loved orchestral repertoire ever since I discovered it, but I kind of got into music too late to pick up an instrument and play seriously. Right. But I'd always loved it. I loved going to symphony concerts, and I took this conducting class, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty fun. And around the same time, I started getting thrown into a few choral conducting situations, and then eventually it was like, okay, if I want to pursue this, it's now or never, and applied to some conducting programs for grad school and miraculously got into some. But I have always been drawn to opera, I think, because it was my first thing that I loved, I suppose. And I kind of feel like I get it in a way.
Right.
That, when I started seriously conducting symphonic music, it was a huge learning curve. And it still is a huge learning curve because, I didn't grow up playing that, which a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, when I was taking choral conducting in college, I was like,
yeah.
What? What is a head voice?
What is a head voice?
So
no, exactly.
I totally get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's not your world. So I had to learn a lot of things about a lot of instruments, and about a lot of traditions and style and rep and stuff like that. So and I'm, still very much learning all that stuff. But I think opera just like made sense
Mm.
from the beginning. Obviously, obviously you're learning, but I have always loved it. And so when I got to sort of bring my understanding, also, I will say one of the awesome parts about being a conductor is that you can ask people to do things that you can't actually do yourself. So,
I mean, I do that all the time as a composer. I'm like, I can't play this, but hopefully you can.
yeah, no, literally, exactly. It's like you get to be like, "Hello, flute player. What if you played it like this?" Like I can't play the flute, so I don't even know. If you and I feel like that's sort of something that I've always felt, and when I was an undergrad, especially, I was like, "Ugh, my brain is always ahead of my voice." Technically,
Mm.
I have all these musical ideas, and I don't yet have the technical foundation to express them. And then, I started having more and more musical ideas about repertoire that wasn't singing repertoire. And I was like, oh gosh, what do I do about this? I don't play the violin. I don't play the oboe. So yeah, that is a really fun part about being a conductor. So, conducting opera, I have all these ideas about singing that I'm like, aha, yes, this soprano can do it. I could not do it, but they can. And it's going to be
Nice.
so awesome and satisfying for both of us when we get to sort of collaborate in this way. So,
Do you feel like your experience as a singer has shaped the way that you conduct, and maybe vice versa? Like when you come to sing and somebody else is conducting, you have a different perspective, maybe?
oh yeah, 100%. I do think they constantly inform each other. I've noticed that I find myself actually drawn accidentally, even sometimes, to conductors that are kind of singers or singing conductors first. Like Yannick, for example, actually started out in choral conducting in that world as well. And I feel like you can really tell, and it's why he's such an amazing opera conductor and such an amazing choral conductor as well. He is breathing all the time,
Mm.
And that's something that I feel like I sort of am drawn to music that is legato. I am drawn to music that has breath in it. I think, it's so funny. Last year I ended up doing a ton of Stravinsky, and it was awesome, and it was an amazing learning experience for me. But, I had done 2 months straight of back-to-back Stravinsky, and by the time I was out of it, I was like, let me do something that breathes, please, because I struggle with music sometimes that, you're really just supposed to sort of realize it instead of
Right.
interpreting it or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think both in my taste and also in my gesture, I think I'm trying to think about breathing all the time. I'm trying to think about when even when I think about talking to strings, I use singing words a lot. People will
Right.
tell singers to vibrate through the sound or to sort of keep the air spinning or keep the tone spinning. And I say that to string players all the time. And I hope maybe they think I'm crazy, but um, I think about that a lot when I hear certain instruments, especially ones that you don't have to breathe to play. I'll be like, "Oh, you went off your breath," you know,
Right.
and it's they didn't actually
The
go off their
timpani
breath.
player is
It's
probably scratching his head, going, "What is this lady
He's like,
talking about?"
"What are you talking about?" I know exactly. Percussion is a different story in a way, but also in a way not. So yeah, but yeah, 100%. I'm a singer through and through. I'll never stop being a singer. It is simply the truth. Yep.
Wow, I mean, so much stuff, and we haven't even touched on some of the other things like the Barrio folk songs of the Curtis Ensemble 2021 and the Strauss Dance of the Seven Veils on an all Strauss concert with the Curtis Orchestra. I mean, just so much phenomenal work. So tell the audience now, go visit Micah's website and see when you can next see her in concert. But it's been awesome talking to you and hearing your perspective. And
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been such a treat, and thank you for such insightful questions. I'm very lucky to be sort of drowning in good music. It's a lot, but it is all very joyful, so I'm very blessed.
It was phenomenal hearing Micah's insights into her world of conducting. Be sure to check her site for performances near you. Thanks for listening to The Scorekeepers. The Scorekeepers is produced by Daniel Farrell Music and Sound, with graphic and visual design by Patrick Farrell. Scorekeepers is proudly hosted and recorded using Zencaster. Make sure you subscribe to hear new episodes of The Scorekeepers wherever you listen. And be sure to rate and review this episode to help us find new listeners. Thanks for listening.